Okay, you're looking at the world's first true flower. Well, maybe you're not. That's because it's gone. It lived about 130 million years ago and died out long before humans ever showed up. But paleontologists just uncovered some new details about how this mysterious plant evolved to be the first flower and why that was such a big deal for the whole of nature. The flower in question is called Amborolalis anisadora. This extinct group of plants includes our earliest known relative of all flowering plants or angiosperms. And there are two main pieces of evidence that help researchers confirm that amborolids are the oldest known flowers. First is the structure of their leaves. Like modern-day flowering plants, their leaves were a specific shape with many small veins branching off of a central midrib. Early flowering plants all seem to have had this type of leaf called an eophyllid. So it's a pretty good clue that this feature might have been what helped our fishy ancestors make the transition from water to land some 365 million years ago. The other piece of evidence is the structure of their pollen. Unlike gymnosperms like conifers and ginkgo, which produce naked seeds, angiosperms produce flowers that contain and protect their seeds. But before that evolutionary leap, there had to be a transitional form, and the pollen of Amborella gives us a hint. It had two openings or pores, one at each end, which would have allowed the pollen grain to take in water and expand, helping it to grow a long tube. This pollen tube is still used by modern flowering plants to deliver sperm to the egg. So these two features together, the leaf shape and the pollen structure, tell us that amborolids were likely the first true flowers. But if they were so important, why are we only just discovering them now? Well, it turns out that flowers don't preserve well. They're usually made of soft tissue like petals and sepals that just disintegrate over time. Instead, we find the seeds encased in fruit. So unless fossilized pollen or leaves turn up, flowers are pretty unlikely to make an appearance in the fossil record. And while Amborella spores are the oldest known spores of land plants, they aren't exactly common. That's because they evolved in a place that was basically a desert. The group of plants that eventually gave rise to all flowering plants evolved right here in the middle of the supercontinent Gondwana. And fossils tell us that it was dry as a bone back then. As one of the authors of the study said, it's like the Sahara today. But they still managed to figure out how they did it. How did these plants manage to thrive in such harsh conditions? Well, another study published in the same issue of the journal Nature revealed that the answer might have to do with their neighbors. You see, during the Triassic period, there was a major extinction event that wiped out a huge number of species. But the fossil record also shows that right after that, there was a huge explosion of biodiversity, especially in the plant kingdom. This rapid diversification of life is called the Triassic-Jurassic explosion, and it happened against the backdrop of major environmental changes. There was lots of volcanic activity, changing sea levels, and a massive increase in atmospheric carbon dioxide. All of that meant that the climate shifted from cold and dry to warm and wet. And that, in turn, led to an explosion of plant diversity, especially in the lineage that would eventually become flowering plants. This group of plants took full advantage of this new environment and underwent something called an adaptive radiation. That is when a single ancestral population rapidly diversifies into lots of new species with different traits that help them exploit a bunch of new ecological opportunities. In other words, lots of new species, new adaptations. These early flowering plants spread out across the globe, becoming the first plants to colonize new habitats like rainforests and seasonal forests. And they brought along a bunch of critters that had never before left the water, like early insects and amphibians. It was a totally new world. In fact, it was the diversification of flowering plants that may have driven the evolution of animals. Flowering plants provided new food source, new habitats, and new ways of surviving on land. And the animals that ate them, lived among them, and flew from one to another quickly diversified as well. So the evolution of the first flowers was kind of a big deal. And thanks to recent discoveries, we are slowly but surely learning more about this mysterious group of plants. and what life was like when the first flowers bloomed. Thanks for watching. Do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe. See you next time.